going to be shortest and tallest.
Shortest torso wise, I guess. All right, well, thanks everybody. We're going to now kickstart our remaining part of the afternoon with an exciting panel here. We have our Innovation, Insights, and Optimization panel. It's also known as the Friends of Joe panel, so thank you all for participating.
You use that term loosely, huh?
We'll be doing our stand-up at the later. Jeff Klonowski, who's Director for Digital Customer Product at CDW. We have Ji Woo, CEO and Founder from Adeptmind. We have Ryan Snedden, Senior Director for Data Science at Albertson. And we have Ryan Shirkman, Senior Manager for User Experience and Digital Optimization at Ulta Beauty. And this panel will be moderated by Jordan and Gorosh from Sprinklr. Let's turn it over to you guys.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Excited to be here. As mentioned, my name is Jordan Gorosh. I'm the Director of Sales over here at Sprinklr from Midwest. So really excited to get into it. My first question is for Ryan, and it's about the merger.
Which Ryan?
We handle the merger question.
Yes.
Cool. It's for Ryan Snedden. So can you share a little bit about how capturing insights has changed for you in the last 3 to 5 years?
I don't know that it's changed just for me,
Yeah.
but I think the biggest thing that's kind of happened in the last 3 to 5 years is just the rise of cloud computing, right? And I think everybody hears that term, but I'm not sure that everyone maybe knows exactly what that means. So like, in terms of data science, like a lot of it just winds up becoming how much can you crunch, right? So everybody kind of hears, this idea of, data's growing and it's growing exponentially and it's getting bigger. So what does that mean for like a data scientist like me? Is that you have more to crunch, and so what cloud computing really does is it allows you. The key is compute, right? So if you think about the old days, you had a finite computer and only so much compute, but the cloud computing is really pay to play. So whatever you want to pay, you have unlimited compute. So that means you can really do a lot more than you could. I think the other big change is working with what business partners expect, the expectations. Like I think in the past, I think you hear it a lot that, analytics, AI, ML would have been a nice to have, or you might be able to get it. But like I think everything now tends to, I find it hard pressed to think of any products that were launched, not like products sold in stores, but like products that don't have AI, ML associated with them. So I think everybody tends to expect it. So I think that compute is just going to continue to grow. So
Certainly. Okay. Ryan Shirkman. Talking a little bit about Ulta. So, of course, Ulta has been a company on the cutting edge of innovation. I'm curious, like, what do you all do to foster such a strong culture of innovation, like from the top down?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really about sharing ideas. I think for us, we know that ideas come from everywhere and anywhere, not only within our own company and our own team, but also from our guests. So I think it's really important that the fostering of those kind of ideas, whatever they are put through sort of a discovery method and put through sort of the testing methodologies of understanding what customer expectations are as they sort of shop. We heard from Michelle from PepsiCo earlier. She had mentioned shopping for skin diversity and needing to be able to see colors from dark to light versus light to dark. And I immediately texted Sasha in the room who leads our optimization team, and I was like, that's a perfect test. That's an idea that came from essentially a loyalist that was in the room. Hopefully you're all loyalists. And part of our reward program, but that I think is just something that is really important that we are able to kind of go through the process in order to understand their guest expectations throughout their experience on all digital platforms.
Yeah, definitely. So like when you were able to dig into this customer data and this wealth of customer data that Ulta has, what would you say really surprised you when you were able to kind of pull back the curtain?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of different sources of data. So we heard from Kevin from our customer insights team. We have an analytics team. We have, our own teams are doing our own guest research and talking to guests, customers about their experience shopping, doing surveys, all of the things. So there's a lot of different sources of data that's coming back. But one of the larger things that even as a trend in retail from my experience at Crate and Barrel as well too was guests aren't necessarily logging in. And Michelle had given us a number, 38 million loyalists are part of our program earlier, so I feel like it's okay to say that. But those are people that we can essentially, understand a little bit more once they log in. There's obviously other ways to kind of get around the personalization standpoint, but we're always trying to get people to log in, to be part of our program, to have a better site experience, and essentially be able to give them more information and content back for what they're looking for during the time of their journey. So I think that's really important. And I was surprised, I guess, to continue the trend of being able to figure out how to optimize for that kind of performance. So we have the optimization team that's constantly testing different methodologies to sign in or sign up into our loyalty program. Things like adding a sign-in button next to an add to cart button to get points to be part of the program or sign up, or on page load of a homepage, being able to show that you can sign in or sign up to be part of our program too. So we're always sort of testing these types of things in order to solve that big mystery, I guess you can say, and being able to give a guest a better experience.
Love it. That's great. Yeah, very guest focused. Putting the guest in the center of the conversation for sure. Ryan had mentioned earlier, talking a little bit more about AI and ML trends. I'm curious, what are some trends that you thought would really take off in that space, but unfortunately just did not get off the ground?
Interesting. So there are a few things that currently in e-commerce that I observed to be slower growing than expected. So I came from a voice background, right? So currently, here at Adeptmind, what we're doing, search, text search, and so on and so forth. Before that, I did voice assistants, and before that, I did a little bit at Amazon. So I think two things that I find growth to be slower than expected. One is voice, and another is image-based search, which was surprising. So let's talk about one at a time. So with image search, 2008, 2009-ish, Amazon did this what Jeff Bezos calls artificial intelligence. So at that point, you were able to take an app Amazon had, and you can take a picture, and somebody will be able to show you a product that you can buy. And then it was AAI, because it's not AI at that point. And it took about 10 minutes, and you will get very interesting results. For example, you'll take pictures of your girlfriend and hey, you should, consider life, a book with that title, right? And then so the consideration was, well, what if that is no longer AI? What if it's actually AI? And nowadays, with the rise of a lot of image-based search, people will say once image search becomes good enough, people will stop doing search anymore. People will just take the app or the site and start taking pictures of everything to discover whatever they want. And image search as a search funnel hasn't been, isn't 50% of all traffic, or even 10% of all traffic. It's a lot smaller than that. So that was curious for at least for e-commerce. Secondly was voice, and then for me that hurts a little bit because we started thinking, wow, voice assistance is a thing, and as a company previously we worked on voice assistants, and we made the voice assistant for Samsung, for LG, for Tesla, for BlackBerry, and we're like, wow, people will stop using search, text search. No one will type anymore. People will just talk to the phone, and the rest will be good. And today people still searching and texting and then typing and so on and so forth. So I would say those two technologies but they you can't say they haven't taken off, but they evolved slower than expected. So
Why do you think that is?
I think for people there is this ingrained habit. Hey, it's easier to Google as a platform has been very dominant, right? So people have realized that going to Google and typing for what you want is actually perfectly viable, right? And then so I think the dominance of Google, the dominance of existing platforms for one. Another is content, right? So there are so many web pages out there, but are there that many bots out there to answer your voice requests? And then is it really easy? Is it a habit to really go and take a picture of something and then find something? So the habit isn't over there. And then I would say probably quality of technology, can improve a little bit. So, I think the chicken and egg of, hey, building a little bit more habit, and then there's a little bit more technology. Building a little bit more habit, then there's a little bit more technology, and off you go. Right?
Sure, definitely. We were talking about e-com, which I think is a nice segue over there to Jeff. Hey, Jeff. So I know that you definitely have some background in retail specifically, but I'm curious, like prior to CDW, of course, but what are some of the unique challenges you found with e-com at CDW that you would say are different from perhaps what you did at Ulta and REI?
Sure. So let me maybe start with similarities. So everything I'm hearing down the line here are all things that we're thinking about, even though CDW sits on the B2B side versus the B2C side. So everything around cloud, everything around what we do around optimization, UX research, et cetera, exploring a lot of the new technologies that are out there and seeing what that experience can be for our customers. Now what's different, I will say this, and coming from Ulta previously, from REI, from Sears as well, and just living and breathing retail for many years, and then coming over to the B2B space where it's a very different customer, it's been quite the learning curve for me, but it's been actually very interesting to see at the same time. So what is the difference? So when you think about a B2B customer, in CDW, basic Ulta is a customer, virtually any business in the US probably touches into CDW in some form or fashion. But you guys in your working world are our customers, not necessarily in your personal lives when you're shopping like an Amazon or a Target or an Ulta, et cetera. So, but the experience that you expect in your work world when you are shopping for work-related products, i.e. hardware, software solutions, you have a high expectation that has been set by the retail segment that is now being brought into your work world. And in the B2B side, I think companies have really lacked that overall experience that now consumers in their work life expect. So the big difference is I think B2B has a tremendous catch-up in order to be at the same level of expectations for their customers from that end. What's unique for, I would say, for CDW and versus traditional retail. In traditional retail, a lot of it, like Ulta, you have a physical retail store and you have your website or digital channels. Those are your primary drivers of revenue. When you look at like a CDW, it's, yes, we have digital, but it's very much account manager driven. So every customer basically has an assigned account manager and your relationship flows through that person. We don't have physical retail stores. So that's a little bit of a different dynamic where we're trying to say, we're not trying to replace that account manager relationship with the customer with digital, but we're trying to figure out how is digital the ultimate assistant to ultimately help that relationship, foster that relationship, make it easier for both the seller and the customer as they get the hardware and software solutions that they need.
Definitely, that's great. G had mentioned a little bit earlier talking about some of the projections that I would say like the field might have made that we were wrong about. Ryan Snedden, for you, I'm curious, has there been a time where the data that you've garnered from machine learning and or AI has run counter to what your gut has been telling you? I think we think a lot about this in sports, for example, when people in front offices might find that there's a player or something like that that might look really great on paper, but perhaps in the locker room So I'm curious, have you run into that at Albertsons or perhaps in your other roles as what you call a quant, by the way?
Yeah.
So,
I actually have a follow-up to G's. Both Joe and I lived this at Walgreens, where we were very successful launching refill by scan, which they tried to follow up with, maybe you remember this, refill by voice. So I don't know if anyone's refilled their prescription by voice recently, but probably not. So there's some failure. I wouldn't consider it a failure, but I think it reinforces what G really said, is like, scan worked pretty good. Why would voice be better? Why would I do that? But yeah. I think the one that, and it kind of dovetails interestingly with experience. So we were recently building a model to try to find out what the key drivers of NPS score are. So this is like what you're describing as a counterintuitive result. So one of the key drivers of increasing, and are you guys familiar with NPS? I assume you're all right. So one of the key drivers of NPS, or increasing the score, was having major competitors around your store. So it's kind of a counterintuitive result, but kind of, if you kind of back away from it, there's two things that are kind of going on. Kind of reinforces the idea of quote unquote capitalism, where competition brings out the best, right? And then the other side of it, which is if you're in the only game in town, everyone pretty much hates you. So there's no one else to hate. So, you know, so when we first looked at it, I was like, this can't possibly be right. Like, why would having more competition be better experience? So that was a very counterintuitive result in our case. So
I guess humans are relational by nature, so that could drive some of it, right?
well, if you ultimately, sometimes things always, in that particular use case, things in many ways come back to survival, right? So if it's that survival instinct, if you're being threatened, you're threatening from competition, there's more pressure to do better, right? Because someone is going to fill that void. If you have no competition, you know, you don't have that concern.
Sure.
So on the surface, counterintuitive result.
Sure. Speaking of NPS for Brian Shirkman, curious to hear a little bit more about some of the ways that Ulta thinks about optimizing guest feedback that might be different from other players in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Ulta Beauty, we have the luxury of having a lot of different resources for sourcing different types of data from our insights from guests, essentially. So not only do we have data analytics to help pair some of those actions, we have NPS scores, we have guest feedback that our own teams are doing. So we try to pair all of those things together to essentially offer a really great guest experience. And something that I try to encourage the team every time we have something we're designing for a new product is there's the discovery part of the work that has to just be done, right? Like we want to understand what the problem is. We want to understand where we're sort of going with the idea. We're getting this insights back from our guests. It's forming a new type of product that we can test, whether it be A/B testing or whether it be testing with the prototype, etc. We're getting those results, we're iterating on those. We're essentially then pushing things through to launch a product out in the wild. We use data then to bring it back to be able to iterate on those ideas and keep informing the guest. And when we're even in these design reviews with our team, our leadership team, our key stakeholders, etc., we always want to make sure that we have some sort of data to back up the design decisions that we made. So there's no question about it. Like, we understand that guests are looking for this. This is the problem we're trying to solve. Here are different solutions on how to get there. And being able to use that data to sort of support anything that we have, and then essentially it leads into creating a really great experience that's wanted and will be used, hopefully, by our guests on a digital side. So.
Yeah, definitely. So you talk about kind of like meeting the guest, or perhaps I guess in other languages, customers, right, where they might be. So Jeff, I'm wondering, like, what are some of the ways that you're inspiring your CDW team to think differently to optimize the digital experience across, desktop, tablet, mobile, web, app, right? Because I imagine that quite a bit of that is under your purview. So would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I'll just build on Ryan's comments too, because I agree with all of those. One of the other things we're thinking about from how do we inspire the team is a lot of the things, and especially in the B2B space, we're not getting from insights from our customers. A lot of it is we're breaking new ground. We're saying, hey, we think this is going to be interesting, and then we're taking it to customers to find out, hey, will this work or does this solve a problem for you? So very similar to I think what we're doing with some of our innovation work too is, yes, it's informed by insights and such too, but a lot of times it's just, hey, this doesn't exist. We're gonna try this because we think it might be something interesting. Let's build partially, bring it to our customers, see if it takes root or not, and then keep pushing forward from there. In addition to a lot of it is data-driven work, UX research-driven work, et cetera, that we find insights from our customers. But to the question around across all screens, one of the interesting differences for B2B, and especially for CDW, is most of it is desktop. It's not necessarily folks always on their mobile devices. It's a lot more tablet heavy too. But mobile still plays a really important role in the overall guest experience. So we have to think about, one, how do you just optimize your digital experience across all screens? But then what are the uniqueness or the unique things you have to do for certain screens versus others? Tablet for a while was like this big thing, you've got to create a tablet app, and this was many years ago, where you have to optimize the experience. But what we're finding, a lot of our customers, they are the IT admins, their support staff, et cetera, who are in big server rooms or out in server farms, et cetera. Well, they're not carrying around laptops necessarily, they're carrying around iPads. So how do we optimize the right tools and experiences for an iPad? So really forcing our team to think, and a lot of this is, we've got a lot of folks that have come from the consumer side. So how do you think differently around putting yourselves in the situation of those roles, going out, spending time with them in the field, understanding what they do, and then coming back and saying, oh yeah, so-and-so, this is how they use an iPad. They don't use their laptop or their smartphone, or vice versa in different cases. So we're really encouraging our teams to, one, make sure we can deliver a consistent experience from a commerce perspective, but then when it comes down to the tools that they need, making sure we're being very specific to what are the right screen sizes and form factors that we need to support.
Great. And you had mentioned that a lot of your sales are account driven. So is that feedback around the customer experience? Are you getting that from the account managers specifically? And we'd love to hear a little bit more about what that
It's so traditionally CDW has been a very much, as I mentioned, a seller or account manager driven sales relationship. But what we have found over time is digital can be the great kind of bridge between that and help support that overall relationship. What we've also come across is that there are certain things where we want a customer just to do it on digital. It doesn't make sense for you to call up Jane or John Doe, your account manager, and have that conversation to get something simple. Those things should be easily transacted and done on digital with very little touch point. So what we've been really focusing on are what are the types of transactions or the types of experiences that should be digital driven. But then there's on that spectrum, there's at some point where digital shouldn't handle this. It should go to the account manager because you're talking multi-million-dollar type of setups and things like that that just can't be done easily for a customer online. So where does digital play as pure play? Where is it a complete relationship with an account manager? And then what is the in-between type of digital experience where we can help facilitate that overall collaboration and relationship? So it's a fine line, and we've got some pretty defined areas where we're focusing on where it's either all digital, it's not digital at all, or it's hybrid as far as that relationship goes.
Yeah, definitely. So of course, the omni-channel experience. Ryan Snedden, I'm curious, shoppers obviously, they expect seamless online to offline experiences in your space. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit more about how Albertson has approached this.
It's interesting in the sense that, for me, it's a long journey in analytics, data science here, and I think that on the back end, the grocery industry has been extremely progressive in integrating the analytics into what they do. I would even maybe argue going back to the early 90s, IRI, AC Nielsen days, they kind of maybe started what we know today as data science in retail. Where the grocery industry hasn't been very good is bringing it to the consumer in terms of an experience. So if you really look at shopping online for groceries is a recent experience. So if like for Crate and Barrel, you were able to buy a sofa online in 2005. But in the last 5 years, it's not that the intelligence hasn't existed, right? Or how to do it or how to personalize it, but actually So in many ways, the grocery industry is extremely progressive on the back end in the analytics, and Peter, I think you probably would have, but bringing the experience to the consumer has been really slow. So I think I think we're still early days for that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the real interest of Amazon coming into the space with Whole Foods. They may move that, you know, but I think the digital experience as it relates to either Walgreens or the experience of that seamless, there's a lot of talk of it, you know, when you have 10,000 stores or 3,000 stores, like how do you make that? Because the consumer wants it, but I think we're a little later in that journey.
Do you have a perspective on why, like the why behind that?
I wish I did. I mean, I think there's a belief that within groceries, somewhat of a old school, the operations of grocery are a little old school, and you know, they're probably one of the earliest retailers, right? But so they're a little bit locked by convention. But I think seems to be like a little confusion of how to, when I look at what, you know, VR related stuff, and we talk about those things, but I don't think we even have necessarily, the industry, the grocery industry has mastered digital online shopping. I mean, COVID accelerated a lot of that.
Sure.
By necessity. So, but not naturally innovative in that sense.
I was just going to add to that. So for those locals, I shop most of my grocery shopping's at Jewel, and the pandemic accelerated the amount of digital innovation for online shopping for groceries for delivery.
Yeah.
Was tremendous. I was craving that even before like the pandemic.
Yeah.
And just watching even like in the Jewel experience, when the pandemic first started, they tried to roll out delivery and online shopping. It was rough. I mean, you had to be pretty dedicated to shopping there. But literally every month or two, you can just see the progression of their digital experience to where it's at today. Now, I would argue it's still not where it needs to be, but where they were 2 years ago to where it is now for online grocery shopping is like a quantum leap in my opinion, which has been fantastic. And it's, I mean, one of the, I would say the silver linings of the pandemic and such is it's forced a lot of that digital progression in some of these experiences in grocery, I think being one of the big examples of that.
Yeah, I mean, you could also bring up, like the other thing that's accelerating it is where there's a consumer need, someone will fill the void. So the void is being filled by the Instacarts and the third parties of the world that could accelerate that. So I think it's a combination of all those things, but I think we've come a long way in that, but yeah, I mean, I still think, you know, there's space to go. So.
I think we're up against time, so one or two questions for our panelists up here. Anyone? Sure.
How are you thinking about accessibility as it pertains to like digital innovation and thinking about the designs you're doing for your customers? How does accessibility play in that?
Go ahead, Ryan, I can follow up on it.
Sure. Accessibility obviously is a priority for us at Ulta. So we're constantly putting that into the forefront of our designs and making sure that we're designing things that either hearing impaired, sight impaired, etc., are able to use with voice, etc., that could be a little bit more easily added to the experience. We work really closely on kind of trying to understand the best way to make our site accessible and our app accessible too. I don't know if that totally answers your question, but.
I would just add at a high level for CDW, nothing goes out the door from a code perspective now or experience if it's not AA compliant at minimum for what we do. So I think most organizations have really focused on that now, and there's been a lot of companies that have been hit hard by that too for not being compliant as well. So one, it's the right thing to do, but then obviously there's a legal part to it too.
Quick question, Jordan, you talked a little bit about, you'd asked G about, you know, kind of what are the things that maybe surprised you, you know, and so as you're looking across, you know, with your solution, looking across all these different companies, kind of with search, what are you seeing that maybe is new? What are some of the things from a search perspective, you know, what's the insight there, or are people, you know, what's new there? What are they doing that's maybe different that you've seen?
Right. So I think within discoverability and product discovery, you know, I think the big one of the biggest targets or everybody's talking about is personalization. And even today, lots of people talked about personalization. And personalization mean different things to different people, right? Because early days of personalization, hey, if I input my user ID, maybe my past purchases showing up equates to personalization. But now we're beginning to see personalization to mean more things. There are more attributes that are being personalized. The granularity of personalization becomes more and more so. Right? Well, if we do a compare and contrast, you have previous years of personalization where the positioning of components on a web page, that's personalization. If I arrived internally, parts of my I'll have on the product detail page, I'll have the big picture, I'll have a price, and so on and so forth. If I arrived on Google, I'll have reviews up top. So, or similar products or comparable products up top, because, and that was considered personalization. So nowadays, some of the things that people start talking about is, well, this notions of, are you more, do you have more propensity to buy something that is more mass versus premium, right? Do you have a propensity to have affinities for certain brands versus not? Do you have concerns? Do you care about cruelty-free? Do you care about these others? So the granularity of personalization is becoming more and more, and I think doing that really well can become a really big X factor, right? Like everybody knows, early days Netflix, it was great, but nowadays you log into Netflix, the first screen that you see may likely contain what you want. So the granularity of personalization for discoverability, I think it's becoming more and more.
Great, thanks.
I think we're good to go.
Yes.
Thank you.